Hi everyone, and welcome to the Digital Beanie panel discussion on digital automation for accounting and finance professionals. I'm Karen Dupree and I'll be facilitating today's discussion. Just a quick note for all our attendees before we begin. There'll be a live Q&A after today's discussion, but please feel free to pop any questions into the chat as we go along, and the panelists will answer as and when they can. So let's get on to the reason we're here today. There's been a dramatic change in the way we work due to technological advancements and the world of work in general. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we've been forced to find remote working solutions, which still allow for people, processes, and systems to work seamlessly together across vast distances. And while digital automation has been around for some time, the current business climate has necessitated the acceleration of these solutions. And this is no different in the finance function. There's a strong shift towards automation for transactional and repetitive tasks, moving accountants away from clerical work to a more strategic role within their organizations. And we've seen finance partners increasingly becoming business partners, engaging with and influencing business practice. So today, we're going to focus on digital automation solutions within the finance and accounting space and talk to a panel of experts in the field, from the technologists themselves to finance practitioners who've embraced these technologies or who are on that automation journey. Today, we have with us, firstly, Baldu van der Merwe, the CFO of LabourNet, with a background in chartered accounting and experience in managing diverse, large financial departments of international, local, and multi-country organizations. Welcome, Baldu. We then have Glenn Ansell, the Intelligent Automation Practice Lead for Tangent Solutions, who is also a recognized innovator in the world of technology. Welcome, Glenn.
Thanks, Karen.
We have Lenore Kerrigan, a renowned thought leader in the world of technology and commerce, as well as a qualified chartered accountant herself, with a particular interest in governance, risk, and compliance. Welcome, Lenore.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the audience as well. Thank you for joining us today.
And finally, we have Jackie de Jager, the finance manager for Spoor & Fisher. She's a qualified chartered accountant and a corporate financial professional with experience in business process automation, as well as process redesign and re-engineering. So that's it. We've got our wonderful panel and we're going to kick off a wonderful discussion. Let's start off with a clarifying question. I'm going to direct this to you, Glenn. Since the onset of the fourth industrial revolution, there's been a lot of buzz around automation. And as the practice lead for intelligent automation within Tangent Solutions, can you provide an overview of what is actually meant when we talk about automation in business processes?
Sure, Karen. I think essentially with the way the world of work has changed, employees these days are inundated with work. I think the speed of business has significantly increased from 20 years ago. The volumes of information that we're working with has increased significantly. And what automation really is, it's a technology or the use of technology to improve accuracy and throughput of processes within organizations by essentially allowing systems to execute tasks or processes within a business and really replacing manual effort. I think furthermore, it obviously gives the ability for organizations to scale without a linear relationship between growth and cost.
Wonderful. And the one thing that I just want to clarify, we've heard the terms, when you talk about automation, there's a couple of terms that are bandied about. There's a term RPA and BPM, and they're spoken about interchangeably. Is there a difference between these two, or are they one and the same?
Quite a significant difference. So BPM, or business process management, really more refers to digitizing processes within an organization, right? Whether that be hire to retire or whatever process that might be, you're ensuring that those processes are digitized in the system, that you can look for fallout and wait for these workflows to kick in, look for approvals, whereas robotic process automation, it really, or RPA rather, focuses more on actually doing the work that human beings typically would have, taking away some of the mundane data capturing type work and allowing, or rather liberating people to focus on areas that are more human-centric and where we can add more value.
Okay, so there is quite a dramatic difference between the two.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, we've got Jackie and Voldu in the discussion today, primarily because of the kind of focus they've turned, or their organizations have turned to on the RPA side. So perhaps I can direct some questions to them to speak about, their experience and their journey with RPA. So let's start off with Jackie. Because her organization is currently pre-automation and about to really embark on this journey. So as the finance manager of Spur and Fisher, what business challenges do you currently face in your organization that you believe could be solved through automation?
Karen, at the moment, we currently spend about 95% of our time capturing data, and that's anything from supplier invoices to agent invoices to daily bank allocations. And with the ever-growing transaction volumes, I think I could, first of all, lower employee costs by not replacing staff members that's leaving or not recruiting additional staff members. And with RPA, I'll be able to use my staff members for their core strengths in analyzing data rather than sitting in just processing invoices, day in and day out. We also have a number of errors on a monthly basis, and that goes from capturing errors to compiling reports from raw data, duplication of work, different versions of data sets. And I think with RPA, we can eliminate most of those errors and handle this ever-increasing capturing of data and volumes that come through the door every day.
It sounds like a massive opportunity within the organization for
Yeah, definitely. I think at the moment the team literally sits there 100. At the moment, I think it's about 100% of the time just capturing invoices.
That's fantastic. In terms of the opportunity there. So Voldu from LabourNet has obviously gone through RPA, a previous RPA journey, and as I understand is currently engaged in an RPA journey within his organization. Can you perhaps share some insight about what it's meant for your business and in the finance function in particular?
Yes, 100%. I do think a lot of the things is what Jackie has mentioned, and the frustrations at staff level and the complexities Jackie has highlighted it was one of those reasons why we went on it. And our journey was to cater for those things. So we went and we started with our process mappings, and we decided, listen up, we've got a few processes that has unnecessary paper flow, causing paper, wastage of paper, expensive printing, and very paper bound. So for us, our first journey was to initially look at it and saving costs. We didn't have the workload pressure initially. So our journey was, how do we save cost? How do we save cost as a business? How do we get POPI compliant, being a legal driven entity? And we said, well, let's introduce workflow management systems. Let's automate our workflows, get rid of a paper passing through a desk, let it pass through an automated system that does the notification, the task management, the execution, and then also interface directly into our accounting systems, eliminating the need for escalation mails and all those type of things from one person sending a mail where a bot and a manned station actually goes and follows up and says, where's this in the status chart and where's that? And linking the whole process in a nice table that a person basically gets a report the morning on their table saying, this is 50 completed, these are 10 pending, these are the people it's pending with. So for us, that was initially the outlook. And then our second outlook was exactly what Jackie mentioned. We had this severe pressure on our business staff, financial staff. They normally have month end, and we're normally the type of people that have this busy peaks and almost inhumane busy peaks that we experience, where you've got new clients. Every new client is a new transaction. Every client has got 1 or 2 or 3 different products. Every product has a different region. And the bigger your organization is, the much greater the volume of exponential growth becomes. And the human side, as beings, we cannot keep up with the same processing speed, exactly what Jackie highlights. And we went and said, well, we're defining our processes. We went and defined our processes and then went to robotic processing. And we currently, with robotic RPA, with Tangent, where we're automating our month-end process in its entirety, where our financial manager sits 2-3 days, 24 hours basically of work, manipulating, coding, recoding all that information. And for us, it's just simply not worth that time, because the value that my management team and my FM team under me is interpretation, in analysis, sitting in the meetings and guiding the regional managers and being part of their decisions, rather than driving just reports. So that's our journey. Our journey was first compliance, simplifying cost, and now it's about efficiency, and extreme accuracy, because I don't think doing the same thing repetitively over time, you will not be flawless. Error will slip in, and because morally you deplete yourself. So yeah, that's our journey. That was our experience.
Gosh, I mean, you've had so many benefits. So you've really seen some good returns on that investment through the RPA. To both of you then, what in particular about RPA, robotic process automation, as a solution made you decide to turn to that solution? What was it about RPA that you've found appealing, particularly? I don't know if Jackie wants to answer first, and then we'll take it to Baldu.
Sorry. No, Valdo can go first.
Go for it, Valdo.
Oh, gents first today, not ladies. Thank you, Jackie. Yeah, so for us, it was obviously we could not keep up with paper flow. So like I've mentioned before, being in a legal area, in a legal space, being in industrial relations space, the risk of a document disappearing, the risk of information landing on the wrong table, a lawsuit around the corner. And we just decided, listen up, for us, it was the first thing is, how do we get hands off the table? How do we get documents out of hands and just let it flow to designated areas? And the first and the easiest solution was automation. It's removing the need of, and it's not to reduce head count and so forth per se. That was just to mitigate our safety and our future potential cost. Then it was, we always believe, or we still believe, humans are not bots, and we're not meant to be bots. We're not meant to do repetitive man-day and high volume work at rushed processes, because these things will break you. It will lead to inaccuracy. It will make you feel like there's no growth or anything. And for us, it was the key thing that drove us to that was contingency. And the word contingency for us meant like having a person doing something like that meant there was always going to be a need for a second person in the backup, in the chain, to be able to take that over. And we didn't have the capacity as an SME and as a fast-growing business that is agile to staff extra people the whole time, because it burdens your business. And why did we go to RPA? Because I think RPA is just so much faster implementation and a lesser of a cost implementation than having this massive ERP system. Because you get ERP and everybody would say, go ERP route. But for us, we're a fast-growing company, an agile business, and a proper ERP system comes with rigid rules, and it hinders you from being agile, because there's just so many things that need to be in place. And it's such a large capital outlay initially. Your return from a proper ERP system is very far in the future. And what for us drove us to RPA is because you can have multiple properly functioning systems that can be linked with automated bot linking and report testing and interfacing between the systems that are so much more accurate and faster that it serves the same purpose as a proper ERP. And I think for us it was there's just that 24/7 availability to do that. Your reporting becomes more instantaneous, and it was just so much faster. And that's why we went to RPA route, for the immediate return on our investment.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I mean, I really like that. I like that idea of the agility around it. I think that's a fantastic benefit around RPA. And Jackie, is there anything you want to add to that? I think
Valdo touched on everything. For us, we are just starting this journey at Spur & Fisher. And I know Valdo said, it's RPA is a little bit cheaper than ERP, but at the moment we have got an ERP solution that's probably as old as Spur & Fisher itself. So we are in the process of changing that as well, simultaneously, and then coupling that with RPA. And I think it's, for us, it's mostly to make our business a little bit more agile and flexible. And without a doubt, cost saving. You know, the quality of work, the output that I get from my staff, reduce risk, improve compliance. So we, especially like you said in the legal space, I mean, we can't afford to make mistakes. A mistake will have a lawsuit on our doorstep within seconds. So I think that's why it took me 2 years to socialize the idea and get people to buy in. Because like I said to Valdu earlier, you know, the space that we work in, people are still very much caught in, you know, we have to have humans doing work, and we have to, you know, everything is paper-based and everything is in files and everything is on our desks. And for them to kind of buy into this idea that, you know, a robot's going to do something that a human can do. And if there's a, what do you call it? An exception, it will push it out to a human. But that's far and few. So for them to get the buy-in into that. But yeah, so I definitely think for us, it's to improve our quality of work, and at the moment to save costs.
Absolutely. And, you know, interesting you mentioned the ERP system, how things are happening simultaneously, because, you know, you're not implementing the solution in a vacuum. This is a part of a large organization who's obviously embarking on a digital transformation journey. So how do you manage that change within an organization? You know, what contingencies are you putting in place? And I mean, Valdu, you could also respond on this one, having gone through it, but from your perspective, Jackie.
Yeah, I think RPA is a very disruptive but game-changing technology. It presents opportunity to adapt change and, you know, to achieve the marked results. So when we go into change management, we always put it into a few phases, with the first being the preparation, and it's probably the most critical part. You clearly have to define the change and align it to your business goals, your objectives, your strategy, where you think you're going to go, where you're supposed to go, you know, the buy-in that you got from the business. And then secondly, management. Management need to support the change, and all the change efforts should involve your employees, because you have to have buy-in from your employees, because they're going to be scared that, you know, a robot's going to take my job, I'm going to lose my job, so I'm not going to help, I'm not going to assist you, you know, to streamline this process. And then reinforcement, you know, we have to have a proper business case in place, where if there's an issue that comes through, it needs to be solved immediately. You need to close any gaps. Then fourthly, it's always communication, very clear communication strategy. Everybody needs to know exactly where we are, clear objectives, how we're going to measure the objectives, how it's going to be tracked. We have to be proactive in terms of communication, because you'll get resistance from your employees if they don't know what's going on, because they will see all the work going on in the back end, and they will say, you know what, in 6 months from now, these people are going to replace me, so I'm not going to assist them. And it's like Valdu said, it's not to replace headcount, but it's to make us more efficient in what we do and to streamline our business processes. And then, you know, training. So once you've done this implementation, you have to train your staff, must make sure they understand how this works. I mean, the robot can make a mistake, or, you know, something can happen. And, you know, so how do you track these things? How do you measure it? How do you monitor the change process? And then at the end, you celebrate. You have to celebrate your small wins along the way. You have to make people understand why you're doing this and their part in the change that you've achieved. So that's kind of how we do it as work.
Wonderful. Valdu, anything to add to that?
Yeah, if I may, I think, Jackie, it's a wonderful process, and you've covered all the core aspects. So for us, basically in our change management process, if I may add a few things, obviously we always start our change process by having frequent executive meetings where we go and say, what hinders us from being a top tier business? We do a lot of self-introspection initially, and that's normally where we do our root cause analysis. And we do that as transparent as possible with the role players, because that then gives you this idea, okay, there's something that needs to change. And that's then where we define what is the desired end state. So obviously that's not even the change yet. That's just saying, but we don't want to be this, and this is what we want to have, and this is the efficiency we want to have. And then we land our vision and goals and get the buy-in from the stakeholders and our business partners. And then normally that gets assigned to a sponsor, a project sponsor. And with us as LabourNet, we are fortunate to have a CFO and a tightly knit CIO relationship, Chief Information Officer, which are very, very much joined at the hip. And we call ourselves the Chief Value Adding Officer team, because it's no longer about Chief Financial and Chief Information. It's about value adding. And so hence there's a sponsor, an owner of a project, of an RPA process, of a process mapping exercise. And then that leads to then saying, okay, now we're going to embark. We've got the buy-in, we've got the sponsor, we've got the accountable person. He's going to drive it. And then he or she goes and defines, okay, what processes are nominated for digitalization, what processes meet the minimum standards. And then you just make sure that the structures, the authority in those structures are in place. Then we go as far as listing the core systems and going and say, what is the dependencies between these systems? Because when you go on an RPA and on a process mapping, dependencies are critical, because anything you change and any dependency you don't take into account is reprogramming, is reinvesting, and you want to almost know exactly where your dependencies sit in every subsystem. If you are as blessed as us to have multiple proper functioning subsystems and not an ERP, we believe it's a blessing for us, because we can add a new product, we can add a new solution to our business so quickly, and we can roll out a Poppy project in a week. That's how agile we are. Where a lot of other entities sit with a position, and it's not about an entity, it's just about the key thing about dependencies. So if you know what your dependencies are and all of those link, it's a critical thing in a process management and a change management process. And to define that well, and then have your sub members buy into those dependencies and blueprints. And then for us, the key thing is we don't always go directly to a development. We first go and see what is off-the-shelf plugin solutions, because sometimes that's the quickest. And then we go and say, now we're in a cycle of it's no plugin, there's no internal solution, there's no outside solution apart from RPA. And then we invest time in building that trust and that relationship with our partner. In our case, it's Tangent. And we take them on the journey. We tell them what our vision is, what our end result is, make them feel part of our finance team for a while in that meetings that we have, tell them the journey, let them know our history. Because if they know where we came from, what we've achieved, how we work, it becomes a relationship that they just buy into your end result and make it happen with you. And to conclude, we basically have a 7-step thing, a 7-step change management. Normally, what does not work? Step 1. Step 2, what causes it? What's the root cause? Step 3, what is the desired end state and the needs? And then you go under that, your core systems, your core dependencies, your core structures, roles, levels, core reporting needs. What is the output you need? The timelines, and what is it going to cost? What's the ownership? And how agile does it keep your business? Then step 4. Is there buy-in to go do RPA? Does the team, the business, the employees believe in it? And is there a sponsor? Step 5, blueprint it, make it repeatable, make it almost mundane and boring. Then you are ready for, we call it botting. Because if it's so mundane and boring, it's ready to hand over to a bot. And then step 7, automate it, have your control totals, hash totals, development, test, rollout, and then like Jackie says, very important, celebrate it. Celebrate the heck out of it.
Wonderful, thank you. I like that botting. Brilliant. You've touched on something, both of you, in your responses around people being concerned that robots are going to take people's jobs. Lenore, I wonder if I can pass this one over to you. In which way does RPA create capacity for human resources? Just to allay people's fears around this.
Thanks, Karen. I mean, it is a subject that comes up very frequently, and skills development is certainly a subject very much close to my heart. And there is, make no mistake, a huge amount of fear when people start hearing about this technology, you know, is it going to replace my job? But I'd like to answer the question, first of all, if you don't mind, about sharing a personal story. certainly for the younger members in the audience. And that kind of takes me back. I like to consider myself a technology evangelist. And this is truly going to age me. But when I was doing my articles, we were still doing consolidations on 14-column analysis paper. And I see Ubaldo smiling there. And we used to get what was known as a comptometer operator, who used to come in at the end of this once we'd input all the data. And a lot of people don't even know what that is. And this lady used to arrive with this machine, and she used to sit there clacking away at the numbers to come up with the final additions of the rows and the columns. Now, anyone who's younger audience, and particularly someone like Jackie, actually should be laughing at me, because when you think about it now, it's laughable. And it's absolutely no surprise why 10 days after coming out of articles, I ran the hell out of the financial world and straight into the technology world. And the reason for that is I got the opportunity, while I was in my final year of my articles, to go and join a training course to learn how to use a spreadsheet. Now, first of all, the course was for the partners only, and I wasn't allowed to go because I wasn't a partner. And being the technology and upstart that I am, I just decided to rock up on the Monday, because probably one of the partners wouldn't rock up. And true enough, they didn't. I took their place, and I learned about rows and columns, and it sounds phenomenal. How could you need to learn about rows and columns? It was on VisiCalc on the Apple IIe. So that takes you back how far back that was. And we had a consolidation that we needed to do. And typically the consolidation would have taken the whole weekend, and we hand the file in on the Monday. Well, on the Saturday at 12 o'clock, I went to the partner's house and I delivered the consolidation, and he told me it was impossible. And I said, no, it wasn't impossible. I used a spreadsheet. And he said, a what? Now the reason that I'm sharing this story with you is because it's a very real story. And I don't believe that there's anybody probably in the audience watching this webinar right now that isn't highly proficient in a spreadsheet and relies daily on their spreadsheet. Did this new technology of, first of all, software that enabled to add up rows and columns and take away the analysis paper, together with the fact of a computer on everybody's desk, which at the time was also outrageous idea. Why on earth would somebody want their own computer? Did that in any way reduce accounting jobs? Quite the opposite. We have more and more accountants and financial people in business today than we ever had before. And we all rely very heavily on that tool called a spreadsheet. And I think, the point is, it's about a shift. That's really what it is. And it's all of our responsibilities. That's whether we technologists like myself, whether we are business leaders, whether we are consultants, partners in a business, is to actually help people in the organization understand that skill shift that is needed. World Economic Forum did a summit in 2020, which was talking about the future of work. And that summit is on at the moment, and it's called the Jobs Reset Summit. And I think that's significant, that we've moved from talking about the future of work to the Jobs Reset Summit. And it is about resetting jobs. It's about moving that shift and identifying that shift in jobs and building people's skills and moving forward with their skills to be able to apply for the jobs of the future. And if you have a look at some of the analysis coming out of World Economic Forum, first of all, and they're also analyzed by country, by the way, so this is not just talking Northern Hemisphere mumbo jumbo. Go and have a look at South Africa specifically. One of the areas being most impacted across the globe is finance and accounting, for exactly what both Waldo and Jackie was saying, is this mundane, repetitive, meaningless type of work, what made me run for the hills out of the finance world, has been the reality in finance and accounting, and hence why the ideal candidate for you to use technology to constantly make it better, to become better business value drivers. As Waldo said, to the business. So it's impacting finance and accounting the most, and the jobs that are being impacted are obviously those mundane jobs. So let's be honest and truthful about it. Jobs will be impacted. I challenge you to find a comptometer operator today. You're not going to find one, okay? But you can find millions and billions of people, I can say, who now are absolutely astute at spreadsheets. And I just use that analogy about what we're talking about now when we start talking about this term robotics, which seems so out there, etc. What we're really talking about is bringing in a digital workforce into our organizations. And you're going to have a digital workforce in your back office, and you're going to have your own digital assistant on your own laptop. This is where the future is. And it's taking people to understand what this is about. And, you know, if you bring in any new workforce into your organization, if it traditionally was a human workforce, let's say it was a merger and acquisition, you're not going to merge the company and just set everybody free without doing a proper orientation with the people, a restructure and a redesign of your organizational design with your merger and acquisition as you bring in all these humans. It's the same thinking that one needs to have as you start bringing in a digital workforce. It's about your whole organizational design. And a big thing is to do with KPIs. And I think this speaks quite a lot to what Jackie was saying, because what happens is you start bringing in this digital workforce, but what we do is we keep traditional human KPIs in place, and then you create conflict. Those KPIs need to be completely reviewed from a digital workforce point of view. And I'll give you one example that we experienced. An executive in a very large company who I know is a huge digital fanatic. I've known him for probably 25 years. And I saw this person was resisting automation in his department. And I need to say, after much alcohol, we managed to get him to confess what the problem was. And the problem was so simple. For his executive role, he needed to have a certain amount of executives reporting to him to keep his role. And if he lost one of his executives reporting to him, his job was at risk because of that. Not because of the automation, but because of the organizational structures, design, and KPIs. So that's why I wanted to share some of that. And those are the things we don't think about. So that touches on a couple of other elements that again, were spoken about earlier, but I'd like to re-emphasize. The first one is executive sponsorship. It's absolutely critical to have executive sponsorship, but it's further than that. It's really important that this should be a board-driven initiative for the enterprise, that the board needs to understand it. Because sadly, we have way too many boardrooms that don't understand the impact of this technology that can have positively on the business or will have negatively on the business if they don't make the shift. It's only going to be one of the two buckets. There's not much in between. So that boardroom understanding is for me absolutely critical. And sadly, and I think I'm entitled to say it because I'm given my history and given my age away. Sadly, most people in the boardroom do not understand this technology and fear this new technology. So what is happening is you're now having your organizational evangelists, let's say it's a finance manager in finance who absolutely passionately understands this and is trying to drive an initiative, but is not getting necessarily the CFO buy-in. I mean, Walter, the reason you're successful is because you have, first of all, that kind of executive sponsorship buy-in, but also that alignment you have with IT is also critical because I've seen so many projects fall apart because you don't get that interdivisional alignment. And the other part of alignment, which is critical for this, is HR, which we haven't spoken about up until now. the human resources department is critical. The human resources department needs to understand that this is a digital workforce coming on board. And that is a mind shift change, because they can also be some of the best change agents in the organization if they understand this. And it goes to, again, to the skilling side. What you really need from a skilling perspective is having an organizational wide skilling approach, or an organizational development schema as people move into this digital space. So as part of your onboarding into an organization, you should need to do some sort of training about automation. Today, most people, if you don't have spreadsheet skills, when you join a company, that's going to be one of the first courses you sent on, to go back to my earlier analogy. So your onboarding training needs to include that understanding of automation, and take people to fundamentally understand what this is about, and the opportunity from this. So, there's a lot of technology out there, and there's phenomenal technology that can do great things, but it's more about the humans than the technology. And it goes to Jackie, understanding that change needs to take place right from the top to the organizational KPIs, organizational structures, building a program with HR, and how do you create compliance for your digital workforce. As you have a compliance, all the compliance training we do for our human workforce, you need to bring those two compliance metrics together as well, which is really important. And as you come down the organization and you start training, you need to train more and more people to become competent with these tools, because there is a lot of young people coming to the organization, which is an incredibly powerful brains trust, that are gamers, for example. By the way, it's been researched that gamers are fantastic at doing RPA. I don't know why, but it's something to do with the thinking. So you find those people coming into the organization, and let them start coming up with ideas, and find a way for those ideas to filter up through the organization, because they become your team's evangelists. We used to call them the coffee machine evangelists, but sadly we don't have those days anymore. But your team's evangelists, and look what I did, which creates that momentum. And as soon as they can share, I'm no longer working overtime at the end of the week or at the end of the month processing all of those invoices. I actually took Friday afternoon off at my boss's blessing to watch my son's soccer match. Now we're getting a whole different mindset, and people will tell me, how did you do that, etc. And one of the sayings I heard quite a few years ago that has always stuck with me, which explains what this technology is about. It's about moving us from humans doing to humans being. And that's the message we need to get to filter through to our teams.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Lenore. That was an absolute wonderful response. I mean, I think we've got a really good understanding of, of really how human, the human interface with this technology can work if it's successful. So thank you for that insight. That was wonderful. And talking about the technology, we're saying what this technology is. If we can just take it a step back, and I can direct a question to Glenn. Does RPA require complex coding or development in practicality?
Karen, I suppose that all depends on the complexity of the process that you're working with and what you're going to be interfacing to. But I mean, in more cases than not, complex coding is not required at all. I mean, the beauty of the sort of automation platforms that are out there today is that they're designed to allow for low complexity or no code type automations, while also giving you the capability to utilize the power of code, or, the so-called heavy lifting elements of process automation. Us as an organization and a technology organization helping companies implement these types of solutions, we're huge supporters of putting the automation capabilities in the hands of all users, really regardless of the technical level that they may be at. And the aim there is really to empower them as knowledge workers to whatever degree they're comfortable, competent in. We think, automation should not be left solely to back office processes that are built by developers, but I mean, they should be harnessed really across the organization, and people should be building solutions that meet their day-to-day needs.
And how do people go about trying it before they make a bigger commitment, Glenn?
I'm going to hand that one maybe over to Lenore. Maybe Lenore,
Okay.
you can touch on, yeah.
Well, I think, we're seeing various models. They kind of try before you buy. And it depends on an organization, on where they are in their thinking. But I think today the important thing is to get some people trained up very quickly in your organization that understands where the pain points are. Because one of the biggest challenges that I have seen in automation initiatives where we've seen they haven't grown at the pace that one would expect them to grow is because you don't take a hammer to every problem. And that is really important. And the only people that can really qualify the problem and choose the right tool are your own internal people. So if you can build up some of your own skills internally that can do part of that qualification, also work very closely with partners like Tangent, organizations that are skilled in this to be able to do discovery type workshops and be able to understand what are the problem areas. Because the one thing as well is we've spoken a little bit about volume and a little bit about value. They're both important, but it's important you understand the distinction between the two. So when you start out, it's strongly recommended that you take something like a volume-based process, because that's typically where you will find the biggest return on investment that will have the greatest impact and build the momentum in your organization. So highly repetitive, mundane, and also where they're prone to errors, because humans are not good at repetitive work, as Waldo said. And typically the outcome of automations on high volume type of environments, the error rate turns to literally zero. So the response of that is fantastic. So it's very good to pick the right processes when you start out, and really using organizations like Tangent that do this on a day-to-day basis to help qualify that is very important. The second one for me is to not discount the importance of value, because you might have a process that is not high volume, but the value is enormous. And how do you measure the value? So I'll just give you one example. In discussing automation to a number of executives around a boardroom, this was probably already, gosh, a couple of years ago, and trying to educate what it's about and the opportunity. And the CEO turned around and said, I spend every Sunday afternoon going onto the web and looking at different resources pricing around the globe and putting it into a spreadsheet and analyzing what I should set the pricing at on a Monday morning. And literally our engineer's mouth dropped. It just literally said, well, that's crazy. I can do that for you in an hour. And the process was literally automated once access to understanding what was needed within an hour. And the CEO's Sunday afternoon was given back to him. That's a value example, right? Because you need to understand the two. So it's qualifying what you're doing and why you're doing it. So my recommendation as well is to start out with a plan. As many organizations would start out and automate one or two processes, but not have a longer term plan. That we've learned is not a good way to go. The outset should be about, first of all, having an automation mindset. Where do we start, and what is the plan to get to enterprise automation? Because otherwise you will identify one or two processes, get those up and running really quickly, and you'll do all that celebration, pop the balloons and the champagne, and then you'll look back 2 months later and say, now what? And that's what I call the stuck phase. And I've used this word stuck number of times, and it resonates with so many organizations, that there needs to be, just like we talk about continual learning, there needs to be a continual automation plan. And identify the stages of automation, and very clear when you start out, what are you trying to achieve? How soon do you want to move to the next stage? What do you want to achieve from that? And the other thing as well is the metrics. Very important to set those metrics up front, understand your current situation, understand those metrics, and evaluate where you set out versus those metrics on a continual basis. And through that, you might get some surprises that maybe that automation wasn't as good a candidate as you thought. But the sooner you understand that, and the sooner you stop it and do something else, the sooner you'll be successful. So it kind of goes back to that fail fast thing. So choose the right processes, couple initially, make sure they're successful, in parallel build the plan for the longer term, and also make it enterprise-wide. So even though we're talking to a finance audience here, and typically we'll find that automation start in the finance environment for all the reasons we've said before, right early on, start engaging other departments. HR is a very good department because there's a huge amount of repetitive work that's done in the HR department, and also compliance issues. And start bringing multiple departments on board, and before you know it, you'll be looking at an enterprise type of environment. My guidance is don't get stuck.
Thank you. Wonderful. I think there's some really great tips to get started on where to begin. We're almost out of time. So, I'd just really like to take this opportunity to thank the audience for joining us here today, and all of the panelists for a really, really robust discussion. I think we've covered a lot of content. I think we've given everybody great ideas on how to get started, on where the opportunities lie. And we are going to continue with questions in our live Q&A after the discussion. So please do hang around should you have any questions. And really a final reminder to pop over to digitalbeanie.com and join this digital revolution. You can collaborate with other finance professionals, connect with digital technology specialists, and you can find out a lot more about how you can transform your business. So yes, everybody, thank you so much. We will hang around and have that discussion now. So yeah, take care, and we'll chat in our Q&A. Thanks.
Thanks, Karen.
Thanks.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you, Karen.